Hello to everybody joining us this evening. We'll just give everybody a few minutes to get settled in. If you'd like to use a chat box to enter in where you're joining us from, it'd be lovely to see where everybody's signing in from. Hi, everybody. Just coming in. Okay, so welcome everybody to our WeRPN Quarterly Research Webinar titled Guiding Forces of Nursing Research for RPNs. In this session, we'll ask the speaker panel to address some common questions that have been asked about RPNs, asked by RPNs about research. We're excited to introduce to you a panel of expert speakers who have experience in clinical practice, education, teaching, and research. We invite you to share your ideas and submit your questions in the question and answer or the chat feature found in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to have some time for interactive discussions and for you to ask questions throughout the presentation. I'm now going to turn it over to Annette Weirs, our Chief Nursing Practice and Research at WeRPN, to begin our evening.
Thank you, Jen. Good evening, everyone. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to our wonderful speakers this evening. But first, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. For thousands of years, Indigenous people inhabited and cared for the land. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. May we dedicate ourselves to moving forward in the spirit of partnership, collaboration, and reconciliation as we learn together and contemplate the possibilities that lay ahead. So in tonight's session, you will hear from members of the WeRPN Research Advisory Council and an RPN newer to research who will be discussing the valuable contributions of RPNs in research, the critical role of RPNs to strengthening the application and translation of evidence into practice and policy, and to promote improved healthcare and outcomes. Our speakers this evening will also share information about how different topics become the focus of research and how research becomes funded. So I'm going to begin by introducing our speakers. First is Jennifer McCauley. She is an RPN, and following a successful career in the arts and fashion industry, she earned her RPN diploma at George Brown College. With over 15 years of experience, primarily in the primary care sector, she is dedicated to promotion, maintenance, and restorative health. Her lifelong passion is to help others, enhancing people's overall wellness and quality of life. Recently, Jennifer joined WeRPN as a Begin case manager, supporting those seeking to advance their nursing career. She has recently completed the WeRPN Introduction to Research e-learning course and is looking forward to sharing her experience here with all of you today. Jennifer, do you want to just wave your hand so people know who you are?
Hello.
Thank you. Our next speaker on our panel this evening is Dr. Janet Rush. Janet is a registered nurse and serves as a voice of family caregivers on the WeRPN Research Advisory Council. She has had a long career in all levels and within various sectors of nursing, healthcare, and research. Currently, she provides postdoctoral mentorship and enjoys adjunct associate professor roles at McMaster, Queen's, and Trent Fleming Schools of Nursing. Very busy lady. Can you say hello, Janet, to the...
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Thank you. And for our regular participants, our next panelist is well known to RPNs across the province. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dianne Martin, who has been a nurse since 1979, first graduating as an RPN and then an RN. Dedicating to lifelong learning, she holds a BSCN and a Master's of Leadership. She remains duly registered as both an RPN and an RN, and honors each category as equally important within the profession of nursing. Currently, she holds the role of Chief Executive Officer, the Registered Practical Nursing Association of Ontario. In 2016, Dianne received the Premier's Award, which recognizes college graduates whose achievements have made a difference in the province of Ontario. And in 2020, she became a Fellow of the Canadian Academy of Nursing. She is the daughter of a nurse, mother to a nurse, and she holds all those who care for others in the highest regard. Dianne, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. And our final panelist this evening is Dr. Nancy Snobelen. Nancy is a research consultant for WeRPN and a registered speech language pathologist, currently non-practicing. She holds a Doctor of Health Administration, a Master's of Business Administration, and a Bachelor of Science in Communication Disorders. She appreciates collaborating with RPNs and researchers to move the WeRPN research strategy forward. As part of the panel, she hopes to enlighten RPN members of the importance of being curious about the role, practice, and value and impact of RPNs in the healthcare system and participate in studies that pertain. Nancy, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. I will now turn it back over to Jen to begin the question round.
Thank you, Annette. I'm very pleased to share. We have about 4 series of questions that we're going to ask the speaker panel to address. And again, these questions were sent to the research department from RPNs. So everybody's coming together to answer RPN questions. The speakers will take turns answering the questions based on their area of knowledge and their area of expertise. And we invite you to engage with the speakers by entering your thoughts, comments, and questions into the chat box. Following the research rounds, we'll have further opportunity to engage in these discussions about our RPNs, research, and evidence-informed practice. So now we'll go over to our first question. So what is driving RPNs to learn more about research? Who wants to take this one? Jennifer?
Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you also for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm very interested about the topics being discussed here today and hope I learn more myself. In terms of RPNs and their interest to learn more about research, I'm thinking it's their main desire to improve patient outcome. And from that in their practice, how do we improve on it? How do we achieve that goal? Often we may have questions around the evidence-based practice that we use and sort of where does this come from? Why am I using this for this intervention? Does it fit my practice? And those kinds of questions I would hope brings us to want to learn more. And that takes us into the research to sort of figure out how those through the studies, through the literature, where that knowledge came from. And we can learn from that. That's what brought me here. That's what brought me into research. Those questions were what led me to the WeRPN course, the Intro to Nursing Research, to find out more about the whole process and hopefully see how I can fit in there and be involved in the process myself. So from my experience, that's how I would take it from other RPNs as well.
I was interested in what you said, Jennifer, about asking questions, because the first time I ever sort of got the research bug, even though I was always interested, I didn't understand it, and I thought it's just what doctors do. All I had been before was someone who went around and collected a signed consent from somebody or managed a research protocol, until a student said to me, I was working in maternal and newborn care, and a student said to me, why do we do a day 1 hemoglobin on our normal newborns? It looks like it hurts them. You know, their little needle stick in the heel. And I said, because it's part of the standing orders. And at that point, I felt I needed to cut my tongue out, because I'd always thought that we should go beyond what the doctor ordered or what the standing orders said or whatever. So with her, we did an audit of newborns and what happened if there was, say, a high hemoglobin or whatever, and learned that it was either ignored or it was repeated if it was high. And yet all newborns have high hemoglobin when they're first born. So then I had the process then of trying to do what to do with that knowledge. So I didn't want to step on anyone's profession, which you shouldn't do as a nurse. However, I did direct my information to the physician who was the director of the newborn nurseries, and then it became his flagship, as if he learned all about it or discovered it, and I just sat back and let him take the honors. I didn't care. For me, it was just about doing the right thing and why do we do something. So if you put a slow motion camera on everything you do every single day, from putting your purse in the purse locker to locking up the meds or whatever, ask yourself why. Just like Jennifer said, it's about asking a question. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we have to, because our competencies say that we have to integrate related knowledge and we have to engage in research. And so we have to demystify it and enjoy the ride. And I have done research now since, I guess, the early 80s. And now I'm teaching others about it, including stats and methodology and all of that stuff. It's not hard. It's just a new language. That's my 2 cents on that one.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer and Janet. Diane, Nancy, did you want to add anything on to that question before we move on to the round 2?
I would add that having been a nurse for 45 years, I've kind of seen the evolution of practical nursing from my early days, where we didn't discuss research at all. In fact, our education was very, very much like that of a PSW today. And eventually, practical nursing has evolved to a point where we understand evidence-based practice, we understand our obligation to it. We also understand that we have something to contribute, that we know that we have a unique experience and a unique viewpoint, and that our people should know what we know. So I think that the evolution, in the early days, I would go in for a report in the morning. This is a true story. In the little town I lived in, and they would, the 2 RNs, the night RN and the day RN, would have report talking to each other. We sat at the back of the room. If there was something they thought was important, they would turn around and tell us, but otherwise, report was not for us. We just had to rely on them telling us the right thing. And now as RPNs, we're not just curious, we're also maybe a little upset that a lot of the research that's done in Ontario does not study RPNs to the extent that it should. So, as our education has evolved, so has our curiosity.
And RPNs are at the point of care, and they have questions that when you've got someone to ask those questions to, it becomes exciting. And I've been described as someone who does meat and potato research. And a doctor described that. And it's about what we do every day. For example, still when I was back in maternal newborn care, why do we bath babies every day? We did a randomized control trial to see what the bacterial colonization rates were in each group. Then why do we wear gowns every day when we hold newborns? We did that study too. It's all published. And so it's important work that reorganizes our care to be the right evidence-informed care. So I think our obligation is clear. And I'm talking about all of us in nursing, practical nurses, registered nurses, nurse practitioners, educators, and so forth.
And then the one point I wanted to add, thanks to all of those, really good reasons, is that in addition to clinical practice, it's important to know exactly what RPNs are doing and how they should be doing it for patient safety and optimization, but also for policy making and HR planning and legislation, because a lot of that information doesn't exist in a peer-reviewed publication. Anecdotally, we can tell one another, we can represent the voice, we can read the voice of RPNs in the province, but we need to hear from RPNs in clinical practice, in policymaking, in all those kinds of situations, so that we have their voice.
Thank you, Nancy. That leads us perfectly into our next question. I'm sorry, but thank you, Nancy. That leads us into our next question perfectly when we're thinking about clinical practice. So why are some nursing issues selected for research and others are not? Janet, do you want to start us off? Do you have thoughts on this one?
Sometimes it all depends on what's hot and what's not. So every year there's something new that is a focus for research for funded studies. So when you get within a group that the group is trying to make a proposal to get some money, you'll see with all that the research institutes have priorities. They've got directional strategies just like we do in nursing. WeRPN has a strategic plan with strategic directions, and so do researchers. So if you can integrate into what's hot or what's listed as the priority this year, that works really well. And sometimes it depends on the amount of support you've got for a particular issue. Sometimes research is born out of a mistake or a morbidity that you see among your patients. But asking the right question and finding people to listen to you is the next step that you would have to do. So for me, in my background, and like Dianne, we're old nurses, and I got you beat. I've been in nursing for 52 years. So yeah, I was born in 49, and I know everybody's doing the math right now. Anyhow, what I found was that my best link was with my association or with the faculty in my local college and university. There's always something going on. And if you can tap someone on the shoulder and say, I don't know a whole lot about research, but I've got this great question and I'm really concerned about it. Is it something that nursing can address? Now, there are some things that research has no point to, you may as well not worry about. If your clinical question is, how are the ORs cleaned between cases? That's not a research question. That's a housekeeping question. So if you can think along nursing lines, figure out what outcomes you would like to change, see if you've got some support for those questions that you have, and link with someone else who can bring you along. Everybody needs a mentor. Everybody needs someone to help them through that. I needed it as much as anybody else. And I ended up being research trained, which was great. So now I can do all sorts of things from a research point of view, including working on your advisory committee. So some issues are not related to nursing, or you don't need to solve them through research. You can solve them through audit, or you can solve them through group discussions, or you can actually ask a researchable question, do the literature search, see if it's already been done or not. That's it.
So, and then I love Janet's practicalities because she can get right to the root. But if you go to the next slide, Jen, I put in just some slides about what we've looked at from the research strategic plan and how we happened into a couple of funded studies. And it really is what Janet says. It's about what's hot. So there's strategic plan documents for a couple of the research funding organizations. So Health Canada has these healthcare policies that's important to Canadians. And then the Canadian Institute for Health Research, who administers a lot of the research programs, has their own strategic directions. And there's like anywhere from 3 to 5 to 10 directives that these research funds are trying to help move along. And then the other one that is the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. And there's many research organizations like this, but these are the kind of ones that we've been involved with. And you can see, you just go to their website and you can look at their strategic plan. So if you're working with a neighboring faculty who are interested in RPNs and interested in what you do, then you're looking for those hot button items. And then the next slide I just put together was just what it is. It's you're looking for gaps in the literature, and you can look in a variety of ways. You can look at meta-analysis, doing your own literature review. You can just speak to a bunch of clinicians that you work with and say, what's up, what's bugging you, or what's making you not sleep at night around quality care. You might, talk to your managers or to your leaders in some way and say, well, what are our big dilemmas involving RPNs? And then obviously, like med errors and things that go wrong are those exposed needs. The other thing is, what helps you get selected are you have to know what they're trying to evaluate about your proposal. And so it's in order to do that, you've got to know what that matrix of evaluation is. And you have to remember that some are selected, some are not. And you're in big competition with large research centers and consortiums, and they have grant writers. So although there's lots of spaces for you to try and get involved in research, but it's these kind of large consortiums that often get some of the larger grants, and so you have to kind of wiggle your way in.
If I could add, though, just to really recognize some of the researchers that are so prominent in Ontario, sometimes there is a researcher who will be just so compelling, and they will grab on to a topic that needs to be fully explored, and they will go through projects that look at each aspect of that topic. And sometimes it's not even what people are saying research needs to be done. It'll be someone who feels it needs to be done and is so compelling and interesting that a whole body of research is built just because this researcher had a vision. So I just want to acknowledge those people who do that.
And I'll tell you, every single researcher wants help. And I'm working on a project right now where someone who's doing work with palliative care for kids wants to help with a research project just to learn. So what she's doing is watching how interviews are done, being the field recorder for that, or going and finding articles in the literature, or going to the librarian at your hospital and saying, oh, they're your best friend, by the way. The librarians know everything. And if you say, I'm interested in labor and delivery and the use of non-pharmacologic ways of managing pain, can you help me? They're off to the races. They've got their keywords and away they go. So there are all sorts of people that are helpers around, and you can be a helper as well if you just want the experience. It works. It works.
I wanted to add just one thing as well. Now I've got what I was going to say. It's important to understand that it takes patience and patience with CE and perseverance, because a study that I was involved in 2016, and I flogged for a number of years while I was working somewhere else and while I've been working here, is finally kind of getting some traction in the province. And we have a meeting next week about it with some of the provincial leaders in the area. So it takes like 7 years of flogging it to try and get that person that will grab it and run with it, and with your help.
The other area of research too that I think that RPNs are incredible at is helping with exchanging knowledge, the outcomes of research, and integrating new research outcomes into practice. That's called knowledge translation, and where you're translating the research into clinical practice. And Nancy said it took 7 years of work to get that done. Usually for any new guideline or any clinical guideline, it takes about 2 years on the unit for everybody to get on board with a new policy, because no one likes to change. So there's a whole body of literature about how to help people change. That's the latest in research directions these days, knowledge translation.
Thank you so much, everybody. So now we have these hot topics. We have these situations that nurses have brought forward. We've connected with academics in the community. How do some of these research projects become funded?
So I'm going to start this one off. And I have to tell you right away that I am not the guru in all of this. I only am kind of speaking from my own experience. But one of the, I have a slide for this too. One of them is about hearing those calls and answering those calls for proposals. And so WeRPN has responded to 2 calls with help from an academic researcher at Western. And the first one was with the, I've got them backwards, but it's the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council. And this is the studies that come out of the SSHRC are socially based, not health based so much, not the clinical piece, but how it affects the clinician. And we did some resilience studies in long-term care, and we're just finishing the resilience study in home and community care. And so that's because there was an initial call for partnerships in COVID-19 research. And then the second call, we were able to accomplish it because we had done the first call. We just changed the sector. So that's one way of getting the funding. And then the second one was there was a call during COVID on how do you implement the 6 promising practices that they found when they looked at how we were going to get out of COVID and how we're going to prepare for other pandemics. And so we were successful in getting this grant through Health Excellence Canada and administered through CIHR. So there's 2 examples of external calls for funding. And we are just publishing now on both of these studies. So you'll see peer-reviewed publications. The funding comes through developing a proposal, getting it accepted, and then doing your intervention or doing your study, and then reporting on it, and then doing a good job, because then oftentimes you're called upon again. So, and then from an internal perspective, the next slide, if you wouldn't mind, Jen, and I think Diane's going to add to this, but we have an internal process at WeRPN where we're doing calls for proposals for academic grants, and we've done those for 3 successive years. We're on to our 4th. And then there's also a call for RPN research fellowships. And so there's internal ways WeRPN is promoting funding. And then the other internal funding we have is there might be a specific priority that WeRPN has. Dianne can speak to this. She's done this over the years. And we also are doing some pilot testing around resources that professional practice has developed, and then goes out and tries to pilot test it. And then also we sit on some partnership research teams in order to bring their study into implementation through WeRPN. So Dianne, you can maybe add.
Yeah, we do. We did first dip our toe into research at WeRPN. The first big seminal piece was when we met Janet Rush, actually, when we had them look at the practical nursing role to establish the extent to which it is misunderstood or understood. And believe it or not, that was, I don't know, I'm going to guess 12 years ago. Janet, maybe you have a better idea. But once our board realized,
We lost Diane.
Oh, we did.
But I just want to add to what Nancy was talking about. Funding comes at different levels. For example, we had a great idea about how to help nurses understand and provide care for those women that are experiencing relationship abuse. You see them all the time. If you're in emerge or psych or peds or perinatal, you come across women who may be not safe at their home. Anyway, we were doing a big project on that, didn't have any money, and we needed some. So I had a friend who belonged to the Sore Optimist Club. I mean, all the men's service clubs have women equivalents, and they always want to spend money on something, whether it's deaf or blind or whatever. And the Sore Optimist grabbed onto this project, gave us $7,000, enough to finish the project. We put it out. We published it as well. So there's local areas you can look at, and never underestimate your professional association. There's always someone to listen if you've got a really great idea, because there's a research strategic plan at WeRPN. So your hospital has a foundation. Some of that is for education and development and research and so forth. Tap into there as well. And then, of course, there's provincial health funding agencies, and as Nancy said, the federal ones. So you can go from local right up to federal. Sometimes you can get international funding to do something. I have a colleague who got money from the National Institute for Health in America. She got like $3.2 million. It was amazing. She was pretty proud of that, and we were all proud of her. So like, you never know who you're going to bump into who can give you an idea of where to put your great question. You know, in the 80s, AIDS was hot, really hot, and you could write any proposal and get money for HIV/AIDS. Right now, there's a lot of attention toward DEI, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's where a lot of the focus is right now. And that's both social and clinical. So while Nancy talked about the fact that, you know, there's social sciences that give money, a lot of nursing questions have been answered through funding from Social Science Research Institute. So you never know what you're going to get until you ask the question. And if you don't ask, you'll get nothing. Except, you know, your own personal pleasure of asking a really great research question. But go to your association, they will help you.
Thank you so much. And that brings us into speaking and thinking about the makeup of the research teams and the important role each person plays. Can I ask this panel to speak about what role or roles do RPNs have in these research projects and on these teams?
I might just jump in just to say, just through everything that was discussed here already tonight, I think a lot of the different different stages and different areas were brought up. I know Dianne did mention at the beginning that I think the RPN, she sort of said that we have a unique voice, a unique viewpoint. And so that's a perfect way to put it. And so to know that our insights are significant and valued. And then I think it's in various stages. Where's the role? It could be in all different stages that were brought up tonight. Identifying the issues within your own clinical practice, coming up with your question, something that needs to be addressed, initiating that, like to know that you can engage your your colleagues, and you're able to bring that question and propose a research study. Those are all the things that I'm learning now, that you can actually be a part of that process, right from the onset to the end. You can get out and explore the literature yourself, see if it applies to the problem you're wanting to address. Maybe it's already sort of been resolved or something you can apply, or take it further from there. So I think it could be in all stages, and I'm learning that even more as we discuss tonight here, all the different areas we can, as RPNs, have a role and a place in research.
Well, I mean, the RPN is at the point of care, and that's where the intervention, say if there's a research project that wants to look at a certain disease or entity or problem or phenomenon, and they do a randomized trial, and it's up to the people at the point of care to understand it and comply or adhere. I don't like the word comply. Adhere to the research protocol. So you've got a protocol in place, and you have to administer that protocol to one group of patients and not the others, say. But if you screw up at the point of care with that research project, it's a flawed project. So the best you can do in integrating, and you will be acknowledged for your role in helping with this, is to adhere to the protocol that has been approved for your unit. So I would jump on board with that and see if you can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. I had some staff when I was a manager who had no interest in research whatsoever, none whatsoever. And I said to them, then don't block all of us that want to find out the answer to this question. So if you're in front of me, lead. If you're behind me, follow. But if you're blocking the way, just stand aside, but don't sabotage the project, or else it will be flawed and we got to start all over again, and we don't want to do that. So our role is right with the intervention mostly. So that's where I see the RPN making the biggest contribution, is the cooperation with research projects at the point of care.
If I could add, so first of all, I'm in a hotel room, and apparently, as I always am, and apparently not every charger works equally in this room. So sorry about that.
Nice to see you again. Yeah.
I dropped off right in the middle of saying something important, but I just wanted to say about this particular question that the very first thing, and Jennifer may well have said this, is Jennifer's a very smart woman, but very first thing you do as an RPN, if your interest is getting piqued into into research, is tick that box on your College of Nurses renewal that says, yes, I will accept email from researchers. Tick that box. And when you get emails, whether they're from WeRPN, we send out research for ourselves and on behalf of other researchers, or researchers through the College of Nurses will contact you directly. Answer, if you can, every single survey that comes. And then your next step is to follow up with the researchers to say, I'm really interested in what the outcomes of this research was. Get yourself a report as soon as it's available. And then in your practice, find out who is doing research, or who is, if you're a smaller hospital, it might be your professional practice department that is implementing research. Or it might be the RNAO's best practice guidelines, or it might be, there's lots of ways then that you can implement things into your practice. So you don't have to be in an academic center to make this work. There's lots of ways that you can start getting involved and evolve yourself into maybe even a role in research someday.
And if you ever go to the OHA, the Ontario Hospital Association, that's where all the CEOs hang out, right? And so if you listen to some of them, it's very interesting because CEOs describe their prowess or their stuff by saying, first, how many beds have they got in their organization? Because that means they're a big shot. And the next is about how many research projects and research dollars they have. Those are two big areas that CEOs brag about. So put yourself on the map. So just wanted to mention that.
I wanted to mention something too, is that the when you think about what Jennifer asked or answered in the very first question, that the reason that RPNs are interested in research is that desire for a better clinical or patient outcome. And the RPNs are the one of the roles of RPNs in research is they're the clinical connector, as Janet says. They are implementing all this research in real world environments, and they can speak to whether that actually is a need, whether it's going to be efficacious, like is it going to be a feasible kind of change to the environment, and does it make sense to you in your practice? And so it takes that point of care person to help the researcher understand whether this is valuable research and whether it's a gap in the literature. And it's the ability for RPNs to step up and have their voice heard in a very powerful way. So the one slide that I added to this question, Jen, if you wouldn't mind, is that there's such a variety of roles you could do in research if you got involved. Yes, you would be the knowledge user. You would, like, that's one of the main ones if you're going to be, but you can be an advisor. In fact, we've done some research fellowships that have said the advisor of the RPN advisor on the research team really opened the researchers' perspectives on what it is they do. And we have that quote available, but they can also serve not only as an advisor, but as a co-investigator. We've had an RPN that's done a co-investigation in long-term care. They can also be a principal investigator. I mean, that's a very experienced RPN. That would be somebody like Jen, who is currently doing her own research. So some of these are what Janet would describe low level in terms of how you contribute, but you're still needed at that research table to bring the I guess the eyes of the RPN and the knowledge. But then you can be very high level roles as well. You can be in the study planning, as Jennifer said. I think Janet said that there were some actual field note takers or some observers as your data collecting. You can be doing some writing. So when you eventually get all your data and you've done some analysis, then you can actually be involved in the writing and you have the actual knowledge. So it's just, it's kind of limitless in terms of the roles you could take and how deep you want to get in it.
And a lot of researchers can't spell. They can't put a sentence together. They can't write logically, but we can, because we've done papers for our programs and so forth. Physicians who are PI, principal investigators, they really don't have a lot of excellence in grammar, spelling, and logical flow of a paper. And I've been asked many times to take this pile of information, which is stunningly good, but it's written terribly. And there are those among us from the nursing point of view who are excellent editors. So you may have that skill. You never know. Like Nancy said, there are so many roles in research that I use the word limitless. Like Nancy said, there's lots and lots of ways you can support or lead a research project.
Wow. Thank you, everybody. We're at the end of our 4 question rounds, but I kind of want to sit here and really hear more from each of you. You're also very knowledgeable about nursing and research, and you just hear this consistent theme coming out, that the dedication to clinical practice and the people that we're caring for every single day is at the root. Each of our speakers here today with us share their rich experience about the importance of understanding and using research in our daily practice. We've been asked to consider, who do we want driving research about RPNs? We can hear that and the different roles and the different values that RPNs bring across these different pieces of research. And so we want RPNs' voices in that. we now, speaking of your voice, I'd like to open up the discussion and have this opportunity for you to ask our speakers some questions. We have received a few by email prior to the webinar. And so I think I'd like to take this opportunity just to have a little chat. There's some prompts there on your screen. If any of these areas strike your fancy. We do have this wonderful question in the chat so far about RPNs and job postings for research. There's postings at hospitals and dermatologist clinics for RNs. So how does an RPN, I'm sorry, Lisa, I think an RPN go about getting into this area of research? Does anybody on our panel want to speak to that?
I can, to start with. I think that, first of all, there's not a lot of RPNs in research at the moment. So you're not going to be the first person that pops into a researcher's mind when they're looking for someone. So it's going to be about relationship building. You're really going to need to ask questions, get to know the people in your organization that are working with research, volunteer. But it really is going to be about relationship building. You can also do that at conferences. If you come, we haven't started our big conference day that goes along with our AGM yet this year, but we may very well be there next year, post-COVID. But there's researchers there. They're there with their research papers. You can ask them, how can I get involved? Those sorts of questions. To answer Jen's question, where we don't want research to live is in the hands of Americans and maybe even some places in Canada, because practical nurses in the United States are educated much like our PSWs. And so when the Americans start doing research into the practical nursing role, and then our leadership generalize it over to us in Canada, it really isn't at all giving a picture of Canadian and particularly Ontario RPNs. And that's why at WeRPN, we insist that we support research that's about you, not about American licensed practical nurses and that sort of thing. So I meant to say that earlier when my battery died. So.
And I think too that, when Dianne said something about conferences and networking and finding those people that are doing the research, I have to plug the research symposium that WeRPN has started. Yeah. We'll be having the third one in December, end of November, December, but that's where the researchers come who are doing RPN research. And so you can network with them and they can tell you about their colleagues across the province or maybe across the country who are looking for help or looking for volunteers. So that's one way. I think Jen, probably you and Attila Kovacs are good examples of how you got involved. So how did you get involved with some of those research teams?
Thank you, Nancy. My wheels are definitely spinning. I'm like, oh, I know. Researchers will put out sometimes these calls for research assistance, and sometimes they need help going through literature reviews, really doing a careful scan of what's out there, or they'll want somebody to support data collection, as Janet said earlier. And that's actually how I got started in research. I felt like a fish out of water. I'm going to be completely honest. It is a much different experience than the direct care I was used to providing. But it was wonderful. And I have yet to work with a researcher who hasn't appreciated the value that my lens as an RPN has brought to the research team. Yeah. And I am so grateful and blessed that I've been able to work with RPNs like, I'm going to name drop Attila Kovacs, who was the recipient of the WeRPN Research Award. I'm working with another brilliant RPN that's actually, I believe, here on the call with us, so I won't embarrass her, but she is working on as a research assistant study, and she's been phenomenal at helping us build some of our data collection instruments. So it's built by evidence in the literature, but what she's offering is helping to interpret according to the sector that she's worked in, to make sure that the language is very much aligned with what's used in organizations. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but when you're speaking sometimes with researchers and you're speaking with nurses in direct care roles, so they're English, but they don't speak the same language. They use different terminology for the same situation. And so those are some of the experiences I had right in the beginning. There's fellowships, research fellowships that you're not going to necessarily be leading the project. You could be, I guess, depending on the nature of your fellowship and the design, but it's really about building that capacity in research and it enhancing that skill, because it is part of our competencies, knowing how to critically appraise research to be able to implement it into practice. So there is a lot of different opportunities. Just keep your eyes open and don't be afraid to ask questions and speak up.
You know,
And it is about those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to mention the way you can get into some people's work is, you know, when we go to conferences that sometimes there's a big room with all the posters in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll see people who have done work and you can talk to them. I remember going to one very early on in my career. And I said to someone, gee, that looks really interesting. This was a person who was a researcher close to me geographically. And I said, if you ever need a hand, I'd love to learn. Well, that started the ball rolling with data collection, understanding the language. I thought research was just a pile of mumbo jumbo. You know, I would hear doctors mostly saying, you know, we're going to do a randomized multi-site triple blind controlled randomized blah blah, and I thought this is Swahili. I didn't understand the language, but you can break it down, and sometimes I think they just make up words to keep us out of the research world. But you find that every term that's used in research is different from what you understand that term to be before. Like control isn't about somebody overseeing you. It's about the person who's not having the intervention, the control group. You know, there's all this language stuff that is not hard. It's just a step for learning. That's all. And if you go to the conferences, you can tap anyone on the shoulder, and I dare say they will say, I'm going to take your name because I'm going to be needing somebody to help me with my next project. Would you be willing for me to call you? Right away, you're a research either associate, coordinator, or assistant. Easy peasy.
We should also mention that there are community colleges like Georgian or Fanshawe or wherever that from time to time offer a certificate in research assistance. So can you imagine an RPN with a certificate in research, the degree to which they would understand, be able to assist with research projects and even lead portions of a research project? But if you're really interested in something formal, I would look for that certificate. All of nursing is about specializing, and it's a nursing specialty research.
Yes. Yeah, there was a course I taught in for 12 years at McMaster, and it was a clinical trials coordinating course. So you come out of it with a whole lot of knowledge about research, but you're equipped to coordinate a research project for a researcher who's doing other things. You're coordinating their project. So they exist. So I agree with you, Dianne. There are these certifications that come out of community colleges mostly. That program I talked about isn't running anymore, but there are others, lots of them around.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I even, for me, I did my undergraduate degree. I love being a registered practical nurse. I was very happy in this category of nursing. I felt that I had access to these brilliant nurses in all categories, provincially and nationally. And so I felt very blessed in that area. And so when I chose my undergraduate program, I selected to go in an area of health science that was more interprofessional, so that I could learn alongside the people I was working with every single day. And that's where I began to really begin building my understanding of what research was. And then I did have a comment here, Dianne, because you got kind of kicked out of our little webinar earlier. Michelle's just asking, can you finish your thought about the engagement of the board at WeRPN?
Oh, sure. So as time went on, we as RPNs, and yes, I did work for 10 years as an RN in the middle of my career, but make no mistake, I'm working as an RPN again. But we as RPNs are tired of being told this is the answer and being sort of done to. And so if you're going to have a problem with that, then you better take some steps to fix it, because nobody's going to fix it for us. So the board at WeRPN, the board started creating in their strategic plan first 4 years ago, and now in the new one just released, have created a focus, a pillar of our work that needs to be dedicated to researching issues that impact the RPN and their practice. And I'm so proud of the board for doing that. A certain amount of money is set aside every year for that, so that the RPNs of Ontario are studied, their voices heard, and that also the secondary piece of that that's really special is that vision of scholarly approach no longer lives solely with RNs. It now also lives with practical nurses, and that's really really an important outcome of what the board has done.
Thank you, Jane.
And what the scope of practice as well, as it evolved over time. The role of the RPN isn't just about the fact that they've got 80% of the skills that an RN would normally. It's not about that. It's about it's about your relationships with your patients and their families, and using evidence in practice, and asking the right questions, and monitoring your environment. And the scope of practice has widened incredibly, as has the RN scope. It'll take time for everybody to get on board with those changes.
Yeah.
So just looking at the time here, this is a great discussion. I'm going to say to everybody who's joining us this evening, if you'd like to continue these discussions or have your questions answered, please don't hesitate to email any of us here. We're happy to continue these conversations offline after the webinar. I just want to talk a little bit about building on this discussion, about some of the research programs and activities that are happening with your professional association. One of the questions I had actually sent in the Q&A was around WeRPN's research course. So WeRPN does offer an online 8-week research course. The next session is set to run in July. So if you are interested, that information's on the website, and you can register. For the WeRPN Research Strategic Plan, we brought up that is something that WeRPN follows very closely for all the research activities. The priorities were very much identified by RPNs across the province, and in also collaboration and coordination with some of our academic partners and networks, and the questions we're getting about RPNs. And so this evaluation of our first research strategic plan for 2021 to 24 is underway. And so WeRPN has been engaging with RPNs, RPN employers, educators, and researchers to evaluate the success of the plan and to identify new opportunities to strengthen the research program. And so engagement in these activities include some focus group discussions. And we're going to be running another focus group discussion sometime during Nursing Week. So please watch WeRPN's communications, watch your emails, and you're welcome to join in those discussions. We have an online survey that is open to members to go ahead and provide some feedback on the work that WeRPN is doing around research. And I started out as a member of WeRPN many moons ago, and I have to say they listen and they really do want to hear from you. So if you can lend your voice any way possible, that voice is what's carried forward in some of these plans. And again, our emails are open. And the information that we're going to see is going to help build the 2024 to 2028 research direction. We also have a research advisory council. We're very pleased that Janet Rush is here. She's our family representative on the Research Advisory Council. And so we have, along with Janet, we have credible advisors that include RPNs. We have our patient family representatives, ambassadors, professional practice associates, leaders, academic researchers from both colleges and universities. The members on the Research Advisory Council serve a 2-year term. So if anybody's interested in joining the Research Advisory Council, you can visit the webpage at WeRPN.com for more information. Right now, there are 2 opportunities to join the council, and one is an RPN member. The other position is an academic university member. Another great thing that we're looking at WeRPN is that they fund 1-year research projects recommended by the Research Advisory Committee. And these align with those research priorities that were really highlighted by RPNs. And so in 2023, the 2024 year, we have 4 research grants that were awarded. And so the topics that were put forward were recruitment and retention of nurses in long-term care from Ontario Tech University. We have RPN roles in the operating room from Toronto Metropolitan University, nursing shift assignment tools on acute care inpatient units by Unity Health, and RPN nurse leadership in home and community care by VHA. And so the call for proposals for academic research is going to close on March 31st. And there's also a fellowship opportunity as well. So if you're interested to apply for that, that portal will be open until March 31st as well. So as nurses, we apply that critical appraisal to all evidence, and then we take that and all that information and knowledge and we apply it into practice to promote these practice improvements and optimal health outcomes. To increase accurate and appropriate information about RPNs in the literature that's used to guide our practice, it is important that we hear from RPNs. It's important that RPNs are involved and have the opportunity to contribute to research to help strengthen that impact and relevance of findings. We want the findings to be speaking the language of practical nurses, because we know we speak the language of the patients that we care for. And to help RPNs build capacity in research, that's where our research fellowship opportunities might be a great opportunity. I benefited from them myself. This year, there was 3 research fellows. And so we have one in the operating room, we have one in acute care, and I'm drawing a blank. Nancy, help me on the 3rd one. Why am I drawing a blank? Oh,
One's in mental health.
Addiction. So very, very broad representation across. And I have a note here that the proposals have actually been extended to April 2nd because of the holiday. So we're looking at, I have here on the screen I think on the left-hand side is some of the activities. On the right-hand side is membership communication. So watch your emails. There is a bi-monthly newsletter that will come to you with any opportunities that come forward to WeRPN to participate. It will give you updates, and it will help bring forward some of those hot topics, some of those trends and issues that are emerging from the literature and some of the gaps. And one of those might just tweak your interest, or you might feel that you have that skill to really jump in and really provide that knowledge and skills you have as an RPN. There's a lot of opportunities to keep learning and to keep getting involved. And I'm oh, there we go. So just in closing, we're increasing evidence of RPNs in the literature with other RPNs and key partners. RPNs are skilled health professionals who are leaders, who care, who are dedicated to promote, maintain, and improve health, who provide comfort, care, and support, and are contributing to research to make that positive difference. Tonight, we heard from these wonderful panel members who are leaders in research, education, and nursing practice, who answered questions that were presented by RPNs and are sharing insights into RPN research, how research is selected and funded, and really where RPNs fit. You joined us in an interactive discussion about accessing resources to ensure that we're using the most up-to-date evidence in our practice, and that the evidence we're using is driven by RPNs, or at least informed in part by RPNs. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your schedule. We look forward to seeing you at our next research webinar in June. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, that was fun. Now I can have my dinner.
Thank
Get a
you,
little
everybody.
here. I think
Me
that
too.
was
We're still on. I think we're still on here.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
okay.
on the webinar.
Yeah, I'm